Good afternoon and welcome back post-lunch. The municipality of 37 Lakes has been following the confirmed security incident related to ODTN financials and their application ODTN Pay. 37 Lakes is approximately 50 kilometers away from an appointment 2 location. They're seeing what has been transpiring. They're seeing issues occurring at the local malls, at local service centers, and there is widespread panic in this municipality. 37 Lakes services approximately 250,000 citizens and has approximately 92,000 households. The issue at hand now is not just that they're aware of a security incident. The issue is that more and more information is starting to spread, and council is looking for answers. In the first 2 sessions, we sort of covered what our immediate responses will be from an operational perspective and an administrative perspective, and we dug a little bit for any form of intelligence that we might have. Now, we need answers and we need technical action. Joining me on the table here are 2 industry experts. We have Rarez from Kaspersky. We have Alex from TELUS. Co-chairing with me is my colleague Mark Dillon. Everybody else that you see at the table with me, much like the first 2 modules, will play a part of this exercise by being members, employees, and service advisory providers to 37 Lakes. We have Ali Shahidi, who is both the incident response lead and CIO. We have Gemma Ann, who is the third-party vendor manager. We have Usher Jaffrey, who is the CAO. We have Mirza Beg, who is the mayor. We have Rhonda Bunn as councillor, Shelley Wark-Martyn as public relations officer, and Terry as an investigator and liaison to the municipality of 37 Lakes. Before we begin, let's go through a quick news update that will be coming shortly on what specifically has been going on in our municipality. The newsreel will play in a couple of seconds.
Cyber issue halts tax payment processing, frustrating and leaving municipal residents unable to verify contributions. A cybersecurity glitch in ODTN's financial payment processing software has left municipal residents unable to verify recent tax contributions on their statements. This issue, affecting city halls across multiple municipalities, has delayed updates to tax records, worrying residents about potential late fees, penalties, and credit impacts. City officials are working hard to resolve this backlog, and municipal leaders are pushing for an urgent resolution to prevent further disruption to public services. This is Roshan Khan from ODTN News. Please stay with us as we find out more.
Gives us and shares his screen and tells us what we know now about this attack and dives deeper into it technically. Mark, I will inform you that here at Council, our CAO also has been a CISO previously. There's a lot of anger that we've been taking some time to respond to this situation, and there are questions. Could you first start by giving us an update on what we know technically from the first 2 modules, and where are we at right now?
Thank you, Ali. It'll be good to have someone to help with our security team. So, what we know from what we saw in the previous modules that affected other companies, the first company was a broker payment company, which is exchanging financial data with merchants to process payments. And they were in a situation where they had an extreme amount of technical debt. They had not updated their system that OTDN Financials produces, which is the piece of software that exchanges files and API calls so that we can talk about moving financial data and keep it audited and recorded and safe and secure. When they performed the update, they found that it no longer functioned, and it brought their merchant partners, retail stores, to a halt so that they actually couldn't transact business with their customers. When we fast forward to the second module, what we found was a small pharmacy chain was on the receiving side of that, where they could no longer process payments, they could no longer fulfill prescriptions, and it caused a lot of panic and urgency and potentially some financial woes for them. They were in a situation where they could either roll back to an unsecure version, or they could move forward and try and figure out what's going on. In both situations, this followed an update, and in today's situation, which my screen will come up shortly, I can show you where we're at. We are in a very similar situation, although in this case, we're in a bit of a healthier spot. And the reason we're in a healthier spot is because the first application was let to atrophy. It was very old and not taken after, so the update broke it. The second one was what we call shadow IT, or brought in by not IT, so it wasn't governed properly and there was no knowledge of how it worked. But in this case, this particular municipality has a good program and they have good governance. And so what's happened is we've noticed that the pre-authorized payment process is not working. Citizens aren't having their tax payments come out automatically, they're getting collection calls, and it's actually due to a system failure. The system failure was caused by actions that were reactive from our security operations center, and what they found was there were some odd connections happening. They don't know that it's an attack, but if you look at the recent connections that have come up, you can see that we have several connections from the user known as root. So this is the supreme admin in Linux systems like this. This is a secure file drop location using protocols like SFTP or SSH, and uses key-based authentication. And it is very strange that this user would log in. That is normally not our standard configuration. We would never set it up so someone could remotely log in as the root user. And just out of caution, we have turned the system's connectivity off, which has disrupted the business, which we knew it would. But having someone log in from outside our building as root, when that hasn't happened before because we have the logs, is very concerning.
You've mentioned a couple of things here. I could see that Usher was chomping at the bit. Usher, is there anything that you have for Mark at this point?
I think the only point here is the time to response would be immediate. Understanding what took place from a pre-authorized payment perspective, getting access to logs and having a very timely defined aspect of when the issue started, where are we now, and how fast can we respond to our constituents in a timely manner, because sooner or later our constituents will be reaching out to the mayor and their council members, and having an adequate plan to respond would be ideal, considering adequate factual information instead of just coming up with scenarios on our own.
Thank you for that, and we will sort of look at the response piece, but there's a lot of queries that are now starting to come in. Also, we have a third-party MSP that provides general services to us, and they're inquiring about what is going on. Ali Shahidi, if I can bring you into this, based on what you have seen from Mark and this particular user, I think it was called the root user?
That's correct.
Is there any questions that come to your mind at this point?
Well, there are challenges when it comes to the shadow IT, and having such users, which seems to be actually a system-based type of account and credentials that has been compromised. So we need to find out about more on the authentication-based part of that, and whether it has been a lateral movement within our environment or not, and how that user could get into our environment, and from the passing the firewalls and everything else, and having the access. So we need to have more information about this in order to come up with a better idea of how the root cause and the zero patient been in this game.
I've received a quick comment from the MSP, Mark, and perhaps if you want to bring up your screen again with the root user, you mentioned keys, which points us to some sort of encryption keys that are being shared in order for people to access these updates. Can you help us understand what were you referencing when you mentioned keys are being shared? Is there something there that council needs to be concerned about?
Well, I mean, honestly, this is pretty deep technical information from council.
Yep.
What we need to do is figure out how to explain it in a way that's business terms.
Yep.
What it looks to us, so think of it like a building. So when you design a building, you have tiered classes of physical keys that open a lock. And the encryption inside of this works very much like that. And so what we have here is essentially someone getting in using what we'll call the master key that opens literally every door. It is not good practice on any system to use that as part of a daily process or nature. In fact, most setups, even straight out of the box operating systems, do not allow this. This seems like a misconfiguration or something worse going on. And so what I would say if we were giving an informal or formal report to council is that we have prevented this from happening in the future for now. That does disrupt our day-to-day business. We don't know why this is happening. This could be part of the product's normal behavior, and we have contacted the software application developer. But if it is, then we're not okay with that either, and we would want to move forward and find a way to work around this, because this is a serious threat to, this is an externally available system. The purpose of the system is so that transactions can go back and forth between merchants and providers and other agencies that work with government. And so it's a serious risk that we're not willing to tolerate.
Again, the questions, Mark, are not coming directly from council. We have engaged an MSP that provides us general IT services, and again, conversations are happening left, right, and center. There's a lot of panic. There's no command yet around the situation. Are there any other users that you are seeing in our systems at this point?
So there's definitely regular authorized users. Normally what we would do is we would give each institution their own user and their own set of keys to access just their section of the system. But what's happening here is somebody's logging in with basically God mode. They could do anything to the system. They could add applications themselves. They could change configuration files. And so we're auditing that. In a situation like this, you might consider rebuilding the system or restoring it from backup, but you'd want to figure out what's going on first.
Rares, if I can bring you into this, based on what you've seen so far, we've brought you in as one of our industry experts. The user and the activities that you're seeing, based on your expertise, what is it pointing towards?
Yeah, so looks like privileged root account escalation. This is admins that are familiar with the Linux operating system. This is the most nightmarish situation when you see actually the root account being leveraged. And it's clearly the number one concern. It is the fact, what just Mark mentioned, having this account normally, this by default, should be always a disabled account. Number one. Number two, why do we see the presence of the master key, the private key that is supposed not to be in plain text, available on such a sensitive asset, a server that is responsible for processing the payments, which of course, like Mark explained, you had to contain this until figuring out exactly what's going on. By severing the network connectivity of this server, of course, all the transactions now are on hold. So I would say at this point in time, Mark, if I may ask a question, in terms of the technology stack you're currently using, you with your team, pretty sure you have a SIEM, but let's not assume anything. So quick question, do we have a SIEM in the system yet?
We have something like one. We have log aggregation where we take all of the, in this case, syslog file, goes into a common place where it's looked at, and there's regex and looking for regular expression things to see if something strange happens. It could be a OS malfunction like running out of disk space, or it could be something strange like someone trying to log in over and over again and not actually being successful. Those are the kinds of things that our SOC team would normally respond to, and that's actually how this came up. That's how we noticed that the root account was, because we have a flag for if anyone ever logs in as the most admin on any of the systems, be it a firewall or a Linux machine or a Windows machine. We don't like local admins generally that are away from common identity.
Good. So right now your team solely relies on the current collectors that you configured your SIEM. Again, I don't want to make any assumption, but it's safe to assume that all your network appliances within the perimeter, all your critical services, everything are collectors in place, collecting all that information, right? So then you have rules currently in place that which your security team reacts and tries to make sense of what's going on, right? Now, number two question, the most important one, do you have any sort of threat intelligence that helps with the correlation of those alerts? As in, threat data feeds?
We don't. So we're going through a set of maturity projects right now, which is the reason we even have this to begin with. But we are not that mature where we have some kind of correlation threat intelligence or some kind of analysis and aggregation that would take, different systems together and say, okay, I'm seeing a pattern. And honestly, we don't have, we're not ingesting everything yet. So
Wow.
we're going after our primary assets first, the main servers, the most important virtual machines, which in this case, this is a virtual machine. And then we're also going after, switches, firewalls, those kinds of things. But there are systems because we have many buildings. So we have public works, we have Parks and Rec, we have all those kinds of different buildings that in some cases have their own technology stacks. And what we're most worried about is all of our neighbors have had some kind of ransomware attack that becomes very public, and that's the last thing we want to have happen.
Okay. Well, Ali, yeah.
All right, thank you for that. As we're gathering all of this information, Alex, based on what you've heard, any comments, but also what we're trying to understand as council and everything that we're putting together. I'm soon going to have the mayor on and public relations, etc. It seems like the technical team's telling us there's misconfigurations here. Again, are these deliberate? Are these because of inadequacies on our part? Help us understand what this user is up to and how are we supposed to investigate this at this point?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. So, I think it's important to take a step back and kind of look at it and ask the question to the system administrators, right? Is there a reason? Is there a business function that the root account is enabled to do, whether it's legacy or not? But also, who are the other admins on the account? Who's in the sudoers group? Who can make these changes to the passwords? So it's good to get an understanding of the system functionality, but also getting an understanding of, is there a business case for it that this decision was made, or is this a misconfiguration like you said? The other thing that we're looking at here is now we're seeing, and correct me Mark, it was a remote connection, correct? Yeah, so because it's a remote connection, what we're looking at is potential unauthorized access, but we're also balancing that with potential business functions. Someone from the organization logging in remotely to do whatever tasks they're looking for, and also checking out all of those sessions, so looking where these connections are coming from, the IP addresses and all of those things, to see if this is a known location that it should be coming from, or if it's somewhere overseas that doesn't make sense to our org, then that's kind of the steps that I would go through.
Mark, how far deep can we look into in terms of the location of these IPs? How far back can we query? Is this just a point in time, meaning querying it at this point? Can we go back historically?
So we did. We went back historically. We have 3 months of data, and this hasn't happened before in the past 3 months. We don't have more than that because we were only ingesting the logs as of recently. The IPs appear to be consistent. They are not from any blacklist that we can find, and we did poll our internal staff, and none of them are in the habit of doing this or using that account. In fact, they were shocked that it was possible, and they don't even know where the private key would be.
I want to come back to this idea of they were shocked that it was possible and they wouldn't know what the private key would be, because we do need to unpack this a bit. What you're seeing now on your screens is, and I'd like to get the mayor on this, but potentially very soon our third-party vendor manager, Gemma, I will be coming to you as well. But Mayor Khurram, this is not a very good situation. We're now seeing that you're getting calls from citizens, and they're saying that they've gone in to make payments, for example, to pay their taxes in this case, and it's declining the payments. At this point of time, what do you want to know from our team in terms of how we're responding to this?
First of all, I would like to talk about the 37 Lakes residents. As a mayor, and along with me, we have a CAO, and we are here to address all the questions and concerns. First of all, I would like to thank all the residents of 37 Lakes for bearing this type of attack with us. We are working due diligently. We have an expert team and very professional. They are working and due diligently working on that incident along with consultants as well as cyber experts. So when you're talking about the payments are declining, we are here to let you know that you don't have to, it is concerning, but at the same time, the good thing is we caught something that we know there is something going on. It could be a security breach, but I'm not moving forward because investigation going on. So we will keep you updated with respect to the communications and the information that we get. So as soon as we get information, we will keep you updated. So first of all, follow us on our social media and as well as feedback, news feed. With respect to you're talking about the incident, obviously I'll be looking to get a root cause, and I want to know how soon we can get back from my team. So I'm looking to get answers, and obviously I have CEO who he will be looking into it and he will let me know. So we are working diligently 24/7, and as soon as we get something, information that we can say that we have something. Right now it is investigations going on. There's a suspect of having some attack, but there is no information about the residential information leaked out. There is no information, so you don't have to worry about that one right now. Once we have the information available, we will update you as well.
Mehboob, we will come back to you with whatever information. You did say to the public that it could be a security breach, which is going to now trigger more panic, and we will have a public relations officer involved in this. I'm sure our CEO is listening. Mark, I need you to guide Gemma, our third-party vendor manager, because I am very concerned that these misconfigurations, I'm still not clear. Is it on our part? Is it on ODTN Pay? And she's going to be giving them a call. I'm sure their lines are inundated right now, but she does have a direct line. What should Gemma be asking, or what information do you want Gemma to extract from ODTN financials?
So it appears that this started after a routine update. We don't let any systems go longer than 30 days with an update. We track vulnerabilities and update when they happen. This was just a routine update like we would do any other week. And correlatively after, we noticed it. So it seems to have started shortly after the update. And so we want to know from them if something has happened recently, if there is anything that we should know that's special, or if there's we didn't find any bulletins, we didn't find any special. Sometimes the vendors will say, when you're going from this version to this version, you have to do these extra steps. None of that existed. So we don't know if we did something wrong, or if there was a mistake on their end, or it could be completely unrelated. It could be neither.
Gemma, does that give you enough to query our third-party vendors, or are there other questions coming to your mind?
I think we can start with that, understanding that this is a widespread issue. We're also monitoring their websites for communication and posting around information that they might have available, and we'll definitely be reaching out for further information. We've also contacted from the support perspective the technology, so that we can have someone review in greater detail the exact configuration changes that were made, and what we've done as well as part of our action to see if there's any remediation or corrections that they would advise.
Before I go to the public relations team and our investigators and liaisons, Ali, from a CIO's perspective, I'm still very concerned about the fact that we don't seem to be able to point out how some of our configuration, who's responsible for configurations in our environment. There's a lot of finger pointing at this point. Based on what you've heard from Mark, is there any additional technical information that you think we need in order to move forward?
For sure. The very first thing that comes in my mind, I want to know if we have followed the change management protocols and process in place, and whether we follow that before we deploying the update or whatever it has been causing this. Then from the public key perspective that was mentioned, I want to know whether this was managed, basically managed by the vendor and the portal, or it was a custom type of public key management. Then how that and basically use the route that we are talking about would be the depth of the basically the information flow and the access flow in there. Because usually the challenge with something like this, especially again I go back to what I mentioned, shadow IT concept, is that there is no proper documentations related to the technical architecture or showing the data flow or access flow within the organization and the network environment. So we need to gather all of those type of information that we see in order to identify the root cause and how this would take place, especially if you are dealing with a third-party vendor that is providing just connectivity. We have a connectivity integration with our systems. At that point, what was done in order to identify, the health of such technology coming into our environment and all other aspects of that. So.
Mark, there's some more information coming in about some public, basically, messages that are going out. I will involve the counselor and public relations very shortly, but to what Ali has just said, is there anything else that you can show us in terms of our application mapping, our network mapping, that can give us some additional insight?
So first, I'd speak to change management process. We don't have a formal change management process right now. We have automated patching for OS level, and we have hand patch for application level, which is what this was. We did discover that, as is common, so the ODTN pay, which is the application that 37 Lakes is running, is a subscription model. And they have their own custom version of some of the operating systems. So in this particular case, SFTP uses something called SSH. They have their own packaged version of SSH that is different than what is normally installed in the operating system. This isn't completely uncommon. We don't necessarily like it, but it's how the application works. So it's worth pointing that out. We don't have formal documentation on how the infrastructure works, but it is very understandable. It's a basic virtual machine that is running in a hypervisor that is attached on a DMZ behind our firewall because it needs to be accessed. Port forwarding is only going to that specific port for SSH. So it's the way you would normally set it up. The only other way we could lock it down further would be with specific trading partners, but that's getting hard as everyone's switching to cloud, and I don't know which region they're coming from in Amazon, and we just haven't wrapped our head around that yet.
Ali, we'll come back to this very shortly because a few more questions are coming in, and I think there's a lot of clarity that all of us would like to have around how these updates are actually pushed. You've mentioned unique elements of SSH, something that's unique to ODTN financials, but why would we approve such kind of updates and upstreams? I don't understand, but we will come to very shortly. I do have to bring in the counselor and public relations as well as our investigator and liaison, because it's now, and it's going to pop up on your screens very shortly. Here in the municipality of 37 Lakes, we have a very active social community, and one of the influencers in our community by the name of John T has posted a video saying how 37 Lakes went down. Your data is with criminals. It's got about 12,000 views already, comments coming in. There's even somebody who's posted an image of a potential supply chain attack and a comment there that says, I just paid my tax bill, just saw I got double charged. What the F, which stands for waffles taste fantastic, but we'll deal with that later. Counselor of Public Relations, I have you over here right now. We also have our investigative support here. What do we need to do over here?
So I have actually a lot of questions as a council member. So one of them, I did see that post, and one of them is, knowing that our data, I heard, went back 3 months, and yet tax bills are come out every 6 months. How are we sure that the tax bills weren't impacted at the last time? So that's one of the questions I have. But more from getting calls from residents, just wanting to know what I tell the residents, what I need to update them are, what they should do. Is there anything that we're going to do? And as a council member, wanting to know if we have enacted our EOC, so not the declaration of an emergency, but more the EOC, if we've enacted that, and what I can do and tell my residents.
Shelley.
Okay, well, as a PR person, I'm going to say you're not going to tell them anything. There is a role in municipalities of who speaks on behalf of the municipality, and believe it or not, it's not everybody. It is going to be probably the mayor and the CAO as the designated spokesperson for the municipality. What you want to do is, number one, you want to respond quickly. You want to let the residents know what to expect. You want your residents to know that you are engaging with the professionals and the government organizations, including provincial and federal, to address what is happening. You want to put your taxpayers first, so you need to provide some comfort to them that you are working with these other parties to address the first concerns you're going to address are the primary issues, the pharmacy people that can't get their drugs. So you're going to kind of put in order what you're going to address with those individuals. You're not going to blame anyone. You're not going to indicate that there may be somebody to blame for this. You're not going to say any of that to the public because you don't know that, and that just creates another story. So you really want the mayor and the CAO to control the story. You want them to stay engaged with the employees, other councillors, other partners, and the taxpayers. And you want to be transparent and let them know that as you know confirmed information, you will share it with the public. The key to communicating in a crisis is a communication style that's called fogging, where you just repeat what you know in a limited capacity to the public until you know something different, and they'll get the message.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. I will be coming back to you and then two of our industry experts. But Terry, at this point, my other bigger concern is this video that has come out now saying that our data is in the hands of criminals. It is sparking a lot of alarm. Within council, we've had quite a few discussions in the recent past about the dark web. We're very new to these conversations, often very scared to have them as well. But this is triggering us in many different ways. At this point, what are your recommended next steps for us?
Good question. So basically looking to address the number of unknown questions we have. Still from a technical perspective, we do have a number of knowns, the IP addresses, the log information. There is some significant information that we have at our disposal that we can start to leverage and share with other trusted partners in the cyber community of practice. So leveraging trusted partners within local authorities, whether that be the local police of jurisdiction, provincial law enforcement, as well as the provincial cyber response centers, and then including tying into the federal partnerships. Basically, at this point, while not sharing it publicly, this is within these trusted cybersecurity partnerships who have access to other information, right? So basically, what we're trying to do is gain more. So give this technical information that we have to these trusted partners that are going to protect, obviously, the sensitivities of the ongoing compromise for the hopes that they have through their resources, their additional information, data sets and whatnot, a larger picture. They may have an extra couple pieces of information that match or map to what we're seeing, even in a limited scope, which will then help assist all the internal investigations. Furthermore, as indicated by the post, there definitely is reason to start to question the possibility of a supply chain. So the other source of potential information is to reach out to the other, you know, we saw the reports of the pharmaceutical impacts and the commercial payment systems that were going down. So if we don't have the resources, perhaps some of these other community of practice partners have reached into these other victims that can, again, share information, learn from these other victimologies that, again, we can start mapping against our own knowledge set to gain greater clarity. We can find commonalities clearly over these three different types of incidents. There is a commonality of a payment process, right? So without jumping to conclusions, there's definitely reason to start to look at, okay, what can we find out from these other incidents that can provide further insight? So that's where I would start to go, is leveraging now the greater community of practice to gain greater insight to augment that which is happening at our internal technical systems.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Terry. Mark, I want to come back to you right now because there was a couple of things. I'm sure you may have, it seems you have some more information to share with us as well, but you've been talking about ODTN Financials having a very specific SSH process and an updates process. Can you help us understand what all of this means And what further intelligence have you gathered, or what further information have you gathered for us?
Right, I can I can elaborate on this. This is actually fairly common that providers do this when they make software. So SSH, or secure shell, is essentially the gold standard for communicating terminal transactions, that's computer to computer, or doing file transfers, wrapping into SFTP. There are other ways to do it. One of the reasons it's popular is because it's old, it's considered secure, it's patched quickly, and it's part of a very large open source marketplace. However, sometimes to prevent something like this from happening, a provider that resells it to you packaged inside of their product will have their own sort of shielded version off to the side and saying, we don't want to just get the regular open source updates. We want to have our own special version that we verify is safe and good. And so when you get our product, you get our version. So that's likely why ODTN did this. And so where we're at now is we've talked to ODTN about this, and they have told us that the update that we applied had a flaw in it. They're not really giving us a lot of details, but they're recommending that we don't operate that version and that we roll back to our previous version. And keep in mind, this thing didn't break on its own. As far as we know, it's not broken. We just have it disconnected right now because we're concerned about what we're seeing. So an option we might have is to roll back, but I'm still confused on what's happening, and I don't know if I want to, if someone got in our network, we can't just assume everything's okay.
Rares, based on this additional information, it'll be prudent if you can help us with what would you do now?
I will absolutely drill the vendor of the application on their exactly subscription update model, the release notes. We need to have a very clear understanding what this new version introduced. And so that full documentation will really try to help Mark. Is it safe to go? On top of it, let's not forget that we actually, in the logs, we've seen that root privilege. Again, I will drill the vendor. Is this normal? This is like this account, we had it disabled. It's not normal. Is your app update, perform, leverage, activated that account? So, and again, I would at this moment, I will also incline with Terry's input, as in looks like a supply chain, because again has a lot of it's a common recurring theme, what we've seen with the pharmaceutical incident. It's the same application. We don't want to jump into a conclusion. We need to make a clear attribution. Are we seeing here clear sign of an incident, a breach, leveraging an application? So therefore, again, go back to the vendor. We need to understand you just had a corrupted package and coming with vulnerabilities that are being exploited at this moment in the environment.
Mark? Question for you. And perhaps, Alex, you may want to chime in on this. So there's been a comment made about attribution, which will perhaps allow us to even understand the motivations behind this. There is concern because of the video. Public Relations has also flagged it for us that there is concern that data may have been leaked. We don't know for sure. To facilitate and to move forward with our attribution process, what would you recommend as important next steps besides taking what Rara says, which is speaking to our vendor? But at this point, Gemma is trying to get in touch with them, but we're not getting a lot out of them because it's either canned responses or we're being pushed to voicemail at this point. Is there any other investigations you would like Mark to try and run, or any other areas we should be looking at?
Yeah, well, so obviously there's the vendor piece, and that's out of our hands, but we can still look at the things that we control. So our incoming and outbound traffic, like you said, so if there's a suspected data exfiltration, we can take a look at the logs, see if we can see any data flowing outside to unknown IP addresses, and then tie it back to the same IP addresses that made those remote connections from earlier, making sure that maybe it's going there. I know that it's not on a blacklist, but get a little bit more information there. As Terry had pointed out, like leveraging community information and using like OSINT tools to get a little bit more information about the IP addresses.
So we actually did do a deep dive on it after we isolated the system and checked they weren't on a blacklist. It appears as though some systems operated by OTDN are those IP addresses. So it looks like it might be coming from their systems. We're not sure.
Okay, so in that one, right, so we know that it's still going out to ODTN. We need to also kind of take a look and make sure if there's any other connections to that business, right? So is there anybody that has system access on our side that, you know, because if we're treating it as there's a potential security issue on a third-party vendor side, we need to make sure we have a full containment strategy so that we're not open to something else. So obviously we have the integration with the APIs and all of these things, but what we haven't kind of looked at is the identity side of things as well, right? So that root account that was making the connections, if it's going out to that ODTN address, we need to clarify, like, do they have system access to us? And is someone remoting in from that company where there might be issues?
So yes, it looks like they probably did. And that sort of follows the logic of a mistake in an update and then something happens with their systems. Currently it's off, so they don't right now, but it looks suspicious enough for me to say probably OTDN had root access to our systems. Why they did, no idea. Why they were logging in as root where they weren't before, no idea. Again, it is only 3 months of history, so this could be a periodic thing that happens. I would never want an external party to have root access to any virtual machine that's running in our environment.
Totally, sorry. So the only other thing I would do there is make sure that there's no other systems where that is the case, not just with this vendor, but other vendors as well. But obviously, in the case of this incident, we're looking at any other potentially impacted systems.
All right, so we are being asked now on various levels to actually even produce a proper incident and decision-making template plan. This will come up on the screen shortly, but I know, Terry, you wanted to jump in. So, Terry, why don't you go ahead, and then we'll jump into the next.
I was just going to say, from an investigative liaison perspective, while I agree to look at all the connectivity within ourselves, but it begs the question in the conversation as our colleagues were discussing about grilling the vendor. Are all of these things that we're noticing part of what they expected their product to be doing, and getting the clarification on that? Is it typical that their systems are communicating via these IP addresses? Do they have further insight into the inbound and outgoing communication? Are they seeing any anomalous activity now? So we're starting to get enough crumbs that we really need to be holding them accountable and asking some tough questions of our third-party vendor, as it looks like that could be impacting our systems, and trying to discern what is normal expected behaviors between the interactions between their software and our systems, and likewise back and forth.
I appreciate all of this, and more information is coming to light. I will start to unpack this as we go forward. 37 Lakes, and this will come up on the screens shortly. We do have a decision-making template around incident response and business continuity, but a couple of other counselors, and the counselor with us right now will bring her into the discussion as well. But CAO, two important things are coming to attention right now. We know that Gemma has gone to attend a meeting in person with our ODTN rep, so hopefully we get some more information from there. But I do want to ask you, Usher, at this point, Mark's confirming for us that root access to our environment was provided to ODTN Financials. And I can also tell you that there was some concern when we procured ODTN Financials as well because of some conflicts of interest. Do you have any information or any insight that you can share with us around all of this? And could there be some correlation between the two?
As a CEO, I'm utterly shocked about this undertaking, this discovery. I mean, what I noticed is that this access shouldn't be in there in the first place. Well, we're too late in the game now. When we looked at the screen that Mark did share, the access was there between 122 and 530. So even if a third-party entity had access to, they really took advantage of that access. Now, what transpired between those 3 hours, that's TBD. However, understanding there's some historical context to that conversation, I would like to have a representation from both my legal team, understanding that if there was a conflict of interest, why did we go ahead and procure this particular software while there's many softwares out there with industry-leading technology and security in its place? The question I have now is, based on what Terry mentioned, there's enough breadcrumbs in the conversation to actually track it. But at the end of the day, if there was a conflict of interest, why did we, as a collective organization, proceed to procure an software that had inherent vulnerabilities in it?
Ali, if I can bring you into this from your expertise, although this decision for this software I can confirm was made after you joined as CIO, so sort of not necessarily a decision that you made, I do have a question for you. Is there any reason why such root access would have been provided?
I can't see any reason for such access except they had a lack of expertise in-house to bring in maybe them to do the implementation and do the configuration for them. And they did not basically disable at the time after they finished the work. That's usually the case and the challenge that we have because of, again, lack of expertise. But at the same time, I'm going to, as the incident response lead, I would like to ask Mark at what stage of containment we are right now and whether we have initiated the incident response plan and the playbook if we have for the third party basically playbook that we have for incidents, and where are we with the again containment perspective, and if there is any type of command and control traffic going out still, and we are unable to control it, or where we are at with that.
So it wouldn't be fair to say we're 100% sure that we've entirely contained this, because we don't know if it affected other systems. As we stated earlier, we are not centrally monitoring everything yet. So what we're doing now is a combination of manual analysis as well as adding more systems to our central logging and anomaly detection process. So far, we haven't found anything other than this one where this was happening. There's nothing else where there's like a local super admin logging in, especially not from a remote connection. And we do have very few systems that we host that are publicly available to begin with. If someone moved laterally from here, if this was an attack, we haven't found it yet.
Mark, if I can add to this, you said that if someone has moved laterally, we haven't seen anything yet. What kind of observability do we have into these other applications? Can we query them in the fashion that you have done just now, or are we reliant on other tools which might be provided to us by other vendors, which opens up a whole bunch of concerns for council at this point?
We aren't mature enough yet to know for sure. So it's mostly manual inspection that's taking place right now, because we have disparately set up systems that don't have central authentication in some cases, because they weren't broken until they were broken. And so that's what's happening right now. And I'm sure there's some tools we could bring in.
Yep.
I think at this point, because of the limited number of machines we run, especially that are accessible on the same subnet, on the same network segment as this machine, provided that something terrible like our firewall being compromised hasn't happened, which we don't see an indication of yet, we think the damage would be limited to this area if there was any lateral movement at all. At this point, we are still operating some sites, websites and so forth that are on the same group, and they don't appear to be behaving differently than they normally would be behaving, but that doesn't mean there's nothing wrong yet.
Councillor Bunn, if I can bring you into this, Mark, who is sort of leading our investigations and assisting us with some of the forensics here, is saying we don't think that anything else, or we haven't at least picked up anything else. Any other concerns that are coming up to you, or anything that we need to be aware of that's top of mind for you now?
Yeah, so a couple of things that are coming to mind is I still have residents calling me and asking me what they should do, and if we're going to allow them an extension on their tax if they're not able to pay it on time. So just that communication, and I know our public relations officer said they were working on things, and I think that's great that we have a single point of going out to the public with that, so that's great. Have we also contacted other local municipalities to see if they too have been also impacted and what they're doing, and just have some consistency with them?
Okay, we'll try to see what messaging we can get across. We'll also have to hear from the mayor and other councillors and other departments on this. But there is another ongoing situation that's starting to escalate. And although this is just coming to me by text at this point, I'm probably going to need again the assistance of PR and the CAO and probably even the CIO. We have a couple of tech-savvy residents, and one of them has pointed out publicly that the software that we're using, because we've already become pretty public about which organization, etc., they had no release notes about any of their updates. We have nothing tracking what changes have been made, what updates have been made. We've simply accepted updates and pushed them. At this point, perhaps I'll start with the CIO. Is this a concern to you? And we are getting pressed for responses. I'll probably hear from PR how they want to deal with this.
Absolutely. That's why I went back after the change management process and whether we had the regular type of process in place to make sure that such change is going to get better than we are going to test it out and everything else, and also be able to fall back and on the original version that we have had. So this is absolutely a concern, and how this did not go through such process. As a CIO, I know that we have, it might not be perfect, but we do have some basic type of change request process standards that we have in place. And one other thing that I'm going to also at the same time now ask again the CISO, Mark, is have we made at least changes to the privilege accounts and the passport changes and everything to make sure that even with the root user account that we have, and we changed that at least the password and credentials for that?
So we haven't, because we just turned the system off entirely. There's normally not a password set for that account, and the account is disabled. That is the standard configuration we would roll out. So normally you just can't log in as it at all.
But what about the rest of the privileged accounts? Because we are not sure whether we have had any lateral movement, and maybe there are basically privileged accounts that have been compromised or created that we don't have full visibility in them.
We have not changed any passwords.
We should do that.
Or at the very least, review for change.
Yep.
Or at the very least, review the logs of the privileged accounts for any recent additions or modifications that are outside of expected parameters.
Okay. Mark?
These are all good suggestions. I think we're going to have to bring some external help in. We have too few people to do all of this work quickly enough.
Well, this is part of the problem, and I will turn to both Rares and Alex as well, but PR, now we're getting inundated with a lot of queries, and it's becoming publicly quite clear that we don't have enough resources. We have not anticipated something of this nature, and councillors, not just Councillor Bunn, but even the mayor, is now being pushed for comment around why our IT practices, specifically security, have been found wanting in such a jarring fashion. How do we deal with this?
I think it's important that you control the message. Don't let all the other, we're not going to solve these issues in the middle of an incident. These are things that we have to, change passwords. We're not doing that at the moment. We may do that in the future. We may end up with new policy, but those are things that we kind of add to the list of things to do when this is over, so we can respond differently in the future. But I think at this point, we can only answer to what we know for sure, and it seems that our information is limited at this point. So similar to a murder scene, you don't speculate until you have the facts. And once we have the facts, we can tell the public. If we start just saying, well, we know we never change our passwords, we got to start changing passwords, it's really not a password problem today. That's not what the public's worried about. And so the key is to make sure that you're controlling the messaging and you're not embellishing the messaging with unfounded information or things that you really can't address today and aren't the issue.
Fair enough. Mark, as we're coming close to we have about 7 minutes left to come to a conclusion to this. Is there any other information that we've now gathered, any other anomalous activities that you'd like to share?
No, we haven't found anything yet. All we know right now is that we have a system that maybe always had the capability for the vendor to log in remotely, and they just never did. We wouldn't have caught it from auditing configurations because that's not something we do. That's probably something to add to the future list. We caught it because someone logged in as root, which is something we didn't think was possible. We don't see anything that we're looking for with the limited resources we have on any other systems that looks this severe. And I think what we need to find a way forward to is to know that we can safely at least roll back, which the provider has asked us to do. And so we can continue to operate and take payments and then wrap up this investigation without losing the insight of the system we have. But there is risk to that because we don't know what happened here.
Gemma, if I can come to you very shortly, is that there's obviously now a complete lack of trust with our third-party vendor, ODTN Financials. We are being advised to potentially roll back. Are there any questions that you have for them or that you plan to ask them should we execute on this rollback?
I think just before that, I would also want to add that vendor risk assessment as part of this maturity plan would be something we would strive for to make sure that we are transparent in our process and that it has enough rigor to ensure that change management processes, understanding of data redundancy, disaster recovery is all part of the vendor selection process going forward. So that would be one of the key areas that I would want to institute as part of this process for the future.
Quick question for you. Thank you for that, Rariz. I'll come to you and then we'll go to Alex. Rariz, at this point, the idea is to roll back, and there's a very good chance, given there will be another news report also really stressing the situation. But out of curiosity, if we roll back, what do we need to be monitoring for in that situation? And are you comfortable, based on what you know so far, technically, that this rollback is going to work and be safe?
Yeah, extremely, yeah. I would be concerned. We don't have the confirmation from the vendor 100% that this rollback will, put us back on track. But to your question, what would we look for, even assuming we're going to go ahead and do that rollback? Number one, it's exactly, do we see that IP traffic? We need to have that validation, because our assumption has to be we have a possible malicious actor already infiltrated in the environment. Therefore, we need to have a way to track all outbound, actually inbound, outbound traffic at this point. And then, of course, we want to keep that eye on that root account, right? So I would still believe that we are still trying to catch up with what's going on, doing that rollback. Again, we are defaulting our actions, hoping that the vendor knows what it's doing. At this point, we need to absolutely try to involve local government, federal government, someone that has ability to leverage threat intelligence information. And what I mean by that, whatever logs, whatever artifacts we believe we have two choices to go about it. Either we go to the said government entities and they say, please run this by us. We want to have a attribution going on. Or, if we have the money, let's try to hook some threat data feeds to our SIM. And then, of course, we want to run some retro scanning because, as Mark had mentioned, we have kind of data retention for 3 months. Clearly, we don't know what happened before that, but at least the situation that we're facing, having that ability to start having that, retro scanning going on, if we hit anything, then of course we have that correlation rule going on. So then we will know, we will have a confirmation, hopefully, that indeed we've been breached and therefore what to do next.
Safe to say, Alex, that we are now 100% sure this is an incident. The question now becomes, have we been breached? And we're clearly lacking on resources. What do you think we need to do in terms of bringing in some of these resources and doing it in a timely fashion as well?
Yeah, so it's definitely important to try to engage potentially a third party, maybe even an IR firm for a second opinion, especially now that we're declaring it as a security incident. But definitely, we're looking for data exfiltration and data impact as well in the same scenario. So that's going to be the most important thing to determine now that we've seen data going out, even though it's going to a known source. We need to confirm what it is and how that could impact kind of things moving forward.
Thank you for that. Mark, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we bring this to a conclusion and move towards our colleagues in the transport sector that are now taking a hit because of this? Mark?
I just want to say, out of character, as someone who's worked in a lot of this before, it's probably uncommon that this would be caught. It might be a 50-50, I'd say at best, because even if you did spend the money to bring the tooling in, you may not have incorporated it in your business processes yet. And so that's why we see what we're seeing in the world.
Well, with that, I want to thank the team from 37 Lakes for joining in. We've uncovered not just a potential issue with how we procure, but also in terms of how we monitor and the observability that we have in place. The mayor's authority has been called into question. We have councillors concerned. We have PR that's trying to control the messaging, but because of the amount of requests that we're getting, it's becoming quite challenging, and this situation may escalate. In the next session, we will move into the transport sector, which is in one of our partner municipalities is now facing a severe outage. But we will begin to learn more about how this attack is escalating, and we will begin to get more intelligence around activities that the attackers are potentially trying to perpetrate. We'll see you in approximately 25 to 30 minutes with module number 4. Thank you all for joining both in person and online. Thank you, guests from 37 Lakes.